right, everyone. Welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. This is the Wednesday, September 26, 2018 edition of our little weather get-together. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're excited to have on Christine Voss from the North Carolina King Tide Project. Christine joining us from Pine Knoll Shores, North Carolina, just outside of Morehead City. She works with the University of North Carolina with this project. So Christine, we're happy to have you on the show tonight. Looking forward to learning about the King Tide Project.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm a coastal ecologist with UNC at Chapel Hill's Institute of Marine Sciences. Thank you. Glad to be here.
You're welcome. We're glad to have you. So for those who are watching us tonight, thank you again for joining us. This is a live broadcast. So throughout the show, if you want to ask any questions or have any interaction with us, you can do that many different ways. You can comment on our Facebook Live or Periscope stream. You can also comment on the YouTube page or communicate with us via Twitter at Carolina WX Group. So numerous ways that you can get a hold of us throughout the show tonight. And if you are watching or listening later on to the show or the podcast, we'll let Christine at the end of the show give out some information how you can learn more about the North Carolina King Tide Project. So we will also, towards the end of the show, be talking about the continuing recovery efforts in North and South Carolina as the flooding continues in Northeast South Carolina from Hurricane Florence. We will discuss with Chris, who has some really good connections down along the Georgetown area. So Chris will kind of give us an update about what's going on down there. I will say Shay and Jared are both off tonight, so we'll have no tropical update. Maybe towards the end of the show, I'll pull up the Hurricane Center website, and we can kind of briefly talk about what's going on in the tropics. So with that, it is kind of an active evening in the weather-wise. We've had a line of showers and thunderstorms move through western North Carolina, and now they are moving into the Charlotte metro area. That's where I'll bring in our producer, James Brierton. James, how are things there in Charlotte this evening?
They are looking a bit stormy after a really nice day. You know, it was kind of, to me, an unexpected sunny day. I know we had clouds in the forecast, but it was a perfect example not to look at what we like to call those crap apps, where you look at the weather forecast and you get the little thunderstorm icon and you think the whole day is going to be horrible. It wasn't. We had a beautiful sunny day in the 80s most of the day. Now we're getting the thunderstorms as that cold front comes in, and I think that cold front's going to be here to stay. So we'll get a nice little activity, rain line moving through that we have up on radar here. But I think we're probably in for a couple of days of classic North Carolina kind of on again, off again clouds and rain as this cold front stalls out, Scotty.
Yeah, it definitely looks like it's going to be one of those days tomorrow that we're going to have rounds of showers and storms moving into the area. So with that, there is a possibility of some flash flooding in western North Carolina, as well as the mountains. There is a slight risk for that. So that is kind of a level 2 out of 4 for the possibility of some flooding. Also talking about active weather, it's not quite got to the Columbia, South Carolina area yet, but Chris, I know you are monitoring storms off to your west.
Absolutely, Scotty. Sitting there looking at the radar, and I'll pull it up for the folks watching. That way they can see what we're talking about here. All right, here we go. If you guys can see, got a nice little line of storms that's extending basically from Charlotte down across the northern Midlands all the way down to the Augusta area. We do have one severe thunderstorm warning right now for Saluda County until 8:45. Storm heading off to the east at, let's see here, what's the speed on this thing? All right, 20 knots, so about 25 miles an hour. It's heading off to the east. It's going to move into western Lexington County probably around the 9 p.m. time frame, next 30 minutes, 45 minutes or so. Biggest hazard with this is going to be 60-mile-an-hour winds and the chance for some torrential rain, a ton of lightning, just the typical kind of afternoons, summertime thunderstorm. Going forward from that, just like Scotty and James both said, the next couple of days we're going to have continued areas of on and off again rain because of a front that's going to stall over the area. But yeah, I'll cover some more on that in a little while. I'm having some computer difficulties here, guys. Sorry about that.
Christine just figured out the one downside to Google Hangouts, which is that if it hears you make noise,
I'm thirsty.
It comes to you.
Well, thank you for that report, Chris. And like Chris said, we're going to monitor these showers and storms throughout the night and throughout the day tomorrow. And hopefully, all indications are showing that these showers and storms should exit the area by this weekend. I know everybody doesn't like rain on the weekend, so hopefully we can get these showers and storms out of the way by then. So let's bring in our guest tonight. Let's bring in Miss Christine Voss, again, from the Pine Knoll Shores, North Carolina area. It's kind of just outside of Morehead City. Christine, welcome to our show.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here and tell you all about some of the work that we're doing in my lab.
Yeah, we are excited to hear about this. First of all, for those who may not live along the coast or may not have really an idea of what tides are and stuff like that, what is the king tide? I know that's kind of what you guys look at, but as we were talking before the show, it's not really called a king tide.
Well, can I show you some graphics that would make that explanation easier?
Sure, yeah, definitely.
Okay. I'm not sure if I just put up that, do you see a screenshot?
If you will go over to the left-hand side,
Yes.
the second option should say screen share, and you can click on that and hopefully, and then there we
How's
go.
that?
We see it now.
Okay. Well, I'm going to just skip around here to try to answer your question more specifically. And I'm going to go down to here, king tide. So king tide is used by quite a lot of people, and scientists don't care for the term because it has different definitions for different people. The way we define it and the way we see NOAA defining it is the Pergean spring tide. So what's that? Spring tide is when you have either a full moon or new moon. Everybody's familiar with that. And because the moon in its orbit around the Earth is an ellipse rather than a circle, there are times when the moon is physically closer to the Earth, having greater gravitational pull. So when the moon is in perigee, closest to the Earth, and we have a spring tide, new moon or full moon, the moon has the extra gravitational pull. So the higher high tides occur, as well as the lower low tides. So this is an astronomical effect, and it can be predicted.
And so when we talk about these tides, when we see high tide, and you say it's a little bit higher, what are the impacts of that? I know that's kind of what you guys are studying here with the project.
Yeah, I'm going to switch to another slide here. The king tides is actually an international project. It started in Australia and actually came to America through California a few years ago. And it's really open to anyone who wishes to start a project in a given area. Their logo, if you will, is snap the shore and see the future. Because these king tide events are predictable and have the higher high tides, we can if we go out and we can take photographs to document those higher water levels, and it helps us to visualize what normal sea levels will likely be like down the road. So snap the shore, take a photograph of this king tide, and you see what the future water levels will be.
And so when we see these high tides, I know, we don't have Shay or Jared on here, but one thing that they talk about is it presents the possibility of seeing some flooding that takes place in Charleston. Is that the case maybe in North Carolina, maybe some communities there?
Absolutely. So king tides have always been occurring, but because sea levels are now higher than they have been before, yes, we get flooding. There's a photograph here in the lower left-hand corner. This is in Morehead City, I think Shepherd Street, and you see a storm drain here. It's only a partly cloudy day. It's not stormy, but this up the storm drains and onto the road. So people will sometimes find themselves driving through salt water. You can see there's other times when we have this, they call it sunny day flooding or nuisance flooding. The weather can be perfectly fine, but because there's this greater gravitational pull on the sea level, we have a king tide, because sea levels have been increasing and that rate of increase has been accelerating. We're finding higher, we're finding water levels that are actually, yes, causing flooding on a somewhat regular basis. In North Carolina, we have, I can show you another slide. The predicted tide can also be affected, that astronomical tide can be affected by wind in certain areas and actually effects of the Gulf Stream as well. So it's possible that we have a king tide forecast, but if the wind is blowing generally in the southwestern direction, it could actually blow out that extra water and we might not have flooding. But yes, flooding occurs quite regularly.
That is interesting. And so talking about this, coming back to the project that you were doing in the research, how did the idea come about? What kind of give us the maybe the timeline of how the North Carolina King Tide project started and maybe what you guys are doing up to today?
Okay. Well, as I said, that I have a grant from NOAA's National Center for Coastal Ocean Science, and it's part of the Ecological Effects of Sea Level Rise program. And my main focus is looking at marsh habitat and how marsh habitat has the capacity to attenuate or buffer wave energy in storms, and how we can anticipate the ecological function. Those functions that benefit humans, we call ecosystem services, and how the ecosystem services of marshes are going to change with sea level rise. So I'll quickly go through a bit of this. I mean, we love the coast, you know, globally as well as in the United States, about half our population lives in the coastal zone. We also know that sea level has been rising and that rate of rise has been increasing. So the rate of sea level rise is accelerating. We can see here in this graph from the IPCC that the majority of that sea level rise is from sheer physics, thermal expansion. So there's quite a lot of momentum in the rate of rise or in the ocean because there's so much heat, latent heat stored there. If you talk to the coastal zone managers, will see that flooding is among the most critical issues. I've quickly addressed that we have a kind of a continuum in North Carolina where there's astronomical forcing, but especially in areas like here in Pamlico Sound, where we have the Outer Banks with very few inlets, the wind is actually sometimes more important than the tidal effect. We also have the warm Gulf Stream coming up along our coast to about Cape Hatteras, and that's joined with the cold Labrador Current. And sometimes we find that up here by North Carolina, that when the Gulf Stream is actually so strong, it's about 1 meter higher than the surrounding ocean. And I'm learning this from the oceanographers. I'm an ecologist. But when this stream tends to kind of meander to the west, it actually pushes that wall of water up against us and it up against our coast. And then another thing that the oceanographers have been finding is that this rate of rise is actually slowing at times. And we find a backlog, higher water levels, much higher than predicted. Just a quick example here, an old photograph. So, old hydrograph. I want you to focus on the blue, which is the water levels. Here's an area, here's Cape Lookout, and here is Pine Knoll Shores. We have an aquarium here, and only about 40, 50 miles away is Cedar Island National Wildlife Reserve up here. And you can see the difference you can see here in Pine Knoll Shores where we have more tidal input. You can see that semi-diurnal tide regularly influencing water levels. Here at Lola, you can certainly see that probably barometric pressure as well as wind is the main feature affecting water level. So this is some of what, why we in North Carolina are using the King Tides Project, but we're interested in much more than just the highest water levels. We really started the program because we want to improve our understanding of the public and of everyone what's the forcing mechanisms affecting those water levels as well. Here's some hydrographs from this NOAA station at Beaufort. The project, this is 2015 in October, 2016, and spring of 2017. The blue lines that you see here are the predicted water levels. The green are the verified data. Down here, the red were observations that had not yet been verified. Here, as far as, I believe this is the National Weather Service's forecast for flooding, minor, moderate, and major. And what you can see is all of those astronomical harmonics that I've talked about are included in this prediction. And I should explain that these harmonics can be as long as 18.6 years, which is the lunar nodal tide. And therefore, NOAA actually measures sea level rise in 19-year epochs. So to really capture all of what goes on in a cycle, you need one 19-year record. So it can be a bit challenging. But the point is, all of that detail and lots of research has gone into getting these predictions just right. So something else is going on. And it's probably something like the Gulf Stream, where you see for several tides, we have a much higher tide. And we see that pattern quite frequently. Here's some graphs from NOAA looking at regional sea level rise. And if you look at the mid-Atlantic and Northeast, you can see from about 2010 to 2015, the apparent sea level rise was actually decreasing during those years. Whereas here in the South Atlantic coast, as well as the Southwest coast, you can see that our rate of rise is now maxed out to about the highest IPCC estimate. And you had some fairly high levels as well in the Gulf of Mexico. So there's a lot going on with sea level. There's a lot of factors that affect sea level, especially in North Carolina. So we wanted to better understand what was going on. Our Coastal Resources Commission and their science panel have, back in 2010, published a report looking at what we anticipated for North Carolina as far as sea level rise rates, with the top, middle, and lower IPCC scenario out to 2100. And this is what the graph looked like. There's this bar here that stops at about 2045. And we actually had a change of administration and a replacement of everybody on the CRC panel. And they really didn't like the look of this graph. So they said, well, let's just look at 30 years. So right now, they would like us to only consider this amount of sea level rise, which is kind of interesting. The National Water Level Observation Network from NOAA has, there are 6 established stations from NOAA along the North Carolina coast, but they documented that we need at least 6 more stations to really adequately keep track of water level here. Our Division of Emergency Management has now the Flood Inundation Mapping and Alert Network, which is actually very good. And they're still having some trouble getting some good data for the coastal zone here. But there is some stations they have been able to put here in the coastal area. That was done initially with Hurricane Floyd funds. However, as you know, stations need to be maintained, and the funds were not there until we received funds from Hurricane Matthew. So fortunately, they were working for the current hurricane, for the current season. There's also the Coastal Emergency Risk Assessment. The director of our lab, Rick Ludick, is largely responsible for the ADCIRC model. So the ADCIRC model for looking at storm surge, as well as some meteorology, is used to really to predict storm surge everywhere in the United States and its territories. So this is a really, you can find this on the web, and it's a really neat model to look at. So they use the oceanography, storm surge, and meteorology to predict water levels, but they'll go maybe 2 or 3 days out in the future. We've already talked a little bit about North Carolina king tides, talked about what a king tide is. Our original goal was mainly just for public outreach and education. We developed the website, and actually a friend of mine at NOAA developed the What's Your Water Level app. This is very handy for people for actually either sending us photos or for actually reporting water levels. And we just wanted to appreciate the fact that photographs are really can communicate what's going on quite well. Other goal that we were hoping to do is to actually do some water level monitoring. So we worked with the Association of Floodplain Managers here in North Carolina in the 20 coastal counties, and we are working to put water level gauges in at least, hopefully in all the counties. These, we actually train citizen scientists, we build and install the gauges, and they read them on a regular basis, generally once daily, which just gives us an idea of water levels. As many of you probably know, for research purposes, both NOAA and as a scientist, I look at water levels every 6 minutes because you really need that to get the highly resolved information.
I'm glad that's not just us constantly looking at data, Christine. Can I ask a quick question? I don't want to interrupt you too much, but for folks who are watching or listening at home, they're hearing about the app and the submitting of the photos. Anyone who wants to get involved and help you guys with that record keeping, I kind of just want to kind of dwell on that point for a moment. What are some of the avenues? I was looking at the website. Is that a place that they can go to get started?
Absolutely. Probably the easiest is to go to North Carolina King Tide's website. And there are several tabs here with all sorts of information. We have quite a few resources, but whether you look on your cell phone or on your laptop, or you can just click the submit a photo, it'll automatically go to the NOAA app, and you will have really just 3 simple questions that you are asked to fill in with the multiple choice options. But there's some additional information you can add. You can choose to upload a picture. Then there's either you can use a map or ask for coordinates to be found by your, as long as your location services are turned on, and then hit submit. It's really quite easy to do. And again, I know at least in North Carolina, we're interested in all water levels, all things that are interesting. The NOAA, in developing this app, it was originally just for North Carolina king tides, but they've actually developed it to be used globally. So it's really kind of neat. You can use it anywhere you are and make a submission. You can also, on the website, you can look at all those different submissions, and there are other NOAA products there's the inundation dashboard from their Tides and Currents website. There's really a wealth of information there.
Can you give me an idea, and you can tell me if this isn't something you do directly, but if someone sends in some data, a photo, lets you know what's going on, what happens to that information when it gets into, say, your hands or into the hands of the folks who are collecting that?
Right now, it is stored on a NOAA database. We are not doing all that much with the data at this point. However, we are working with NOAA and others to try to figure out how to best use that. There's a lot of modelers who would love to have their hands on this data. There are those from the National Weather Service that would love to see. They have a high watermark program that would love to see these data. Right now, it was a voluntary effort to get this app going. And my friend was actually developing a separate water level data download app. And this is incomplete at this point. So we are working with several folks from the NOAA Sentinel Site Cooperatives, many of whom have king tide projects, to try to work with this so that NOAA can, number one, make the data available readily. If any of your listeners are part of NOAA, whether it's National Weather Service, National Marine Fisheries Service, you can access these data now. But what we do in the meantime is we try to at least twice a month download all the data and photographs there are and we post them, and they're on a link on our webpage. We also say to contact us, and I'll give that information at the end if you need us, if you have a special request for data. But right now, there's a multitude of ways these data can be used, and we are not making full use of it, I have to say. Please, especially anyone from your group, I'd be happy to share the data, the photographs. We know that the photographs come marked with a date and timestamp and the coordinates on there. And then the other questions that are answered can be helpful, can be used by real estate, insurance companies, try to figure out, okay, is it the commercial businesses? Is it roadways that are flooding? What's going on? So there's really a lot that can be done. This app could even, it is the data are submitted and shared real time. So there's other opportunities for this app. It's just that we haven't gotten the funding or the attention yet needed to real.
Christine, we have a viewer question kind of talking about what you are right now. Ty Humphreys is wanting to know, do you think there will ever be a time where the public will have access to this data?
Absolutely. The public have access to these data now through our website, but they don't have it. You can actually go to the website now. If you can go through North Carolina King Tides program. You'll find the What's Your Water Level app. You don't necessarily need to go to the reporter page, and you'll see the summary map. I could probably even go there while we're on air here. And you can pull up the data at any time. But to physically download a large amount of data, right now someone from NOAA or with special permission needs to download it. And then, like I said, we're really sharing it as a CSV file on our website. But yes, you can go and take a look at what's being seen.
And to show people what that website looks like, I've gone ahead and put it up on the screen here. So if folks are Googling it or trying to find it, I think I've got the right link here. You can kind of get a sense of what it is that you're going to be finding. And that What's Your Level is about halfway down the page or so. And I think, as you mentioned, kind of links over to I'm just trying to click on it and it's not working. It's my fault, not the websites. Yeah, fantastic. And Christine, I know you had a map up a moment ago, and we talk about that momentarily as you're working to pull up the application on your end as well too. Let me ask this real fast, because I know with Hurricane Florence, this is something that kind of came up. People found out that flooding, whether it's tidal related or otherwise, is not just a coastal thing too. But you guys are also probably looking for data from folks who maybe are not near the ocean, but along some other waterways further inland as well too. Is that correct?
You're absolutely right. I'm putting back up here a map that shows, again, North Carolina. You can see in green, that's pretty much the eastern extent of the USGS stream gauges, with the exception of Lake Mattamuskeet down here. And then the NOAA gauges read out here along the coast. The few state gauges that we have are noted here in yellow. But all the red here is where we're trying to fill in the gaps. So yes, we have a gauge hopefully going at Union Point Park, if we can still find a solid structure, in Plymouth, up at Mackey's Ferry, down in Surf City as well. Our funding for the special water level monitoring component right now is over, but we are committed, as long as we have some NOAA funding, we're committed to try to keep this going. And we anticipate that between the National Sea Grant Program and NOAA's Sentinel Site Program, we think that this will be picked up by other entities in the future. But yeah, we're really kind of hoping that it turns into a Coco Ross project, if you know what I mean. Hoping that this is something that can benefit a large group of people, researchers, coastal zone managers, the public. I mean, it would be wonderful if you see a photograph and see that your route commute to work and there's a pipe, a water main break and you have to take a different road. You could actually find that out. Or if you see one of those thunderstorm, lines coming across, you can see if there are pictures from that area that have been submitted. So Yeah, we're trying to fill in the gaps, if you will.
Christine, while you have this map up, we had a viewer question. Excuse me, talking about they said Pine Knoll Shores, where you live, Morehead City, are they affected pretty badly by king tides because they are south facing beaches?
We are definitely, we see king tides, but the south facing beach is mainly impacted because the predominant southern wind, summer winds come from the southwest, but it really doesn't affect us any differently for king tides. Here we have semi-diurnal tides, so that's 2 high tides, 2 low tides each day. South Carolina, the same thing, that we don't really see any big effect from king tide other than the hydraulic head of the ocean coming up higher. Here in Pine Knoll Shores, we don't have it coming up through the sewer lines, but in some of the older towns, you definitely see that.
Good information. Another viewer question we have is Krista Wilkes. I hope I pronounced your name right, Krista. She said she's an insurance agent and she's never heard of this. So good information that you're sharing tonight. She wanted to know how could she get in contact with you? And I'm sure, here on the website, you could probably show her that.
Okay, yes. And here I'll put a contact here. King Tides actually has its own Gmail address. And you're welcome to email me at work. Here's the URL. And there's actually, if you go to our website, you should be able to sign on to the listserv because we do send out announcements when we know, when we anticipate, when we know the king tides are forecast, actually. So yes, please feel free to contact us. Additional contact information is available on the North Carolina King Tides Project webpage as well. Shrink these down a little bit, or actually let me get rid of those so you can see. We do put out a calendar every year, and this is what it looks like. We define when the new moon or full moon is going to occur each month. And if those two co-occur close in time, we have a king tide. But there are times where they co-occur, but they're spread apart by 3 or 4 days. And we still have what we're calling an amplified tide. Still, the high tides are higher and the low tides are lower, but it's not the full-blown king tide. And this calendar, and hopefully a 2019 soon, will be on our website as well.
I think that's fascinating information. So you said our folks, they can download the app. Is that correct?
It's actually a web app right now.
Okay.
So I would use your web browser and just Google or you search for North Carolina King Tides, and hopefully it'll come up. And yeah. I mean,
it came up when I Googled it, so I can verify that.
Yay. Well, when we were getting started, we felt pretty lonely out there because we'd hear all sorts of things.
It's on the if folks are looking for it, it has a unc.edu part in the address, right?
It does.
Yeah.
Caught us.
Christine, you've alluded to a couple of times where this is kind of a national and an international thing. And I think one of your last slides was talking about that. So maybe for our followers in South Carolina, is there a similar program that you may know of that exists there?
South Carolina Department of Natural Resources actually uses something called MyCoast. I would have to go to their DNR website to get details. MyCoast is a commercial program that a lot of states have signed on with, and they generally king tide events are announced through that. They have other things like vessel strandings, and it's from our perspective fairly expensive. We were working on a shoestring, and we actually just used Flickr initially, until, again, a friend at NOAA, because I have a NOAA grant, I was able to use other resources within NOAA and basically used, ArcMap 123 survey 123 and developed an app. And it's being used quite widely now throughout NOAA, but it could certainly use additional recognition.
Very cool. Well, Ms. Christine, any last thing before I know we're getting to the top, close to the top of the hour?
Okay.
I found this was fascinating information. The big thing that I took away from this is I had no idea that, the Gulf Stream kind of fluctuated back and forth and it pushed water into the coast, making for the sea level rise there. I thought that was fascinating.
Kind of scary.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had no idea. So that really took me by surprise tonight, learning that. Again, your contact information and how folks can follow you guys and get more information.
So North Carolina King Tides, or nckingtides.web.unc.edu. We're on Twitter, Facebook. We're all social media so far that we can get involved with. Thank goodness I have young technicians who are very adept with the social media. We nckingtides at gmail.com, or you're welcome to contact me, Voss at unc.edu, and we'll be as responsive as we can.
And one last one before we kind of close out. If folks want to get involved with this, I know, sending pictures in is a way to do that, but is there other opportunities or ways that folks can maybe volunteer with you guys or maybe help you out if they see fit?
Yeah, we have had for a there'll a citizen science water level monitoring project. What we were actually using both there'd be private citizens that would actually have a station on their dock. But what we found worked quite well was to put these benchmark gauges up at popular public locations like Big Rock Landing and other parks and recreation areas. And at these locations, you'll find a decal with very simple basic instructions. Basically, observe, take a photo, and send it. There's a QR code right there, and they can send that information in. We're hoping that over time, we'll have more and more benchmarks. And right now, let's see, this is the better map. Everywhere you see red here, either now has or soon will have a gauge.
How cool is that?
People are interested. What we just need is someone committed to take at least daily readings. We build the gauge, we'll bring it, and we will reference that your water level to a standard vertical datum, North American Vertical Datum 88, so that it can be used more broadly by coastal zone managers and researchers.
That is really cool. So hopefully if you are listening tonight, if you live around the coastal area or maybe a waterway, and you'd be interested in doing this, get in touch with Ms. Christine, and that'd be something cool. I know they would enjoy the information flowing into their data points.
Definitely. Thank you.
You're welcome. James, Chris, you guys have anything before we kind of transition?
No, I'm good, Scotty. That was great information.
I appreciate your time, Christine. I know this is kind of forefront in everyone's mind here following the storm and just kind of regular tide cycles as well, too.
All right. Well, Miss Christine, feel free to hang around if you want to, but if you want to go ahead and hop off, you can do that. We are going to talk a little bit about the recovery efforts that are going on along the Carolina coast. James has been scrolling at the bottom of the screen ways that you guys can, if you see fit, help out the folks who are in North Carolina and South Carolina. And Chris, speaking of South Carolina, I know you've had some friends down there who are right now in the midst of experiencing this flooding event that's taken place a week after, or almost 2 weeks now after Florence has moved through the area.
Yes. That's right, Scotty. I mean, you think about it, September 14th, my birthday. I was chasing a hurricane down Cherry Grove. Here we are, September 26th. And as my count right now, there's still 539 miles of South Carolina that's under a flood warning. 72,210 people currently affected by that flood warning. There's still 3 rivers in actually near record flood stage, with the Waccamaw River being over its all-time record flood stage. It smashed Matthew's record by a little over 4 feet, I believe. But still got flood warnings for the Great and Little PD rivers. The Little PD River at Gallivan's Ferry, right at 501, is still a major flood stage, and it's going to remain that way for some time to come. The Great PD basically is still under a major flood stage from Florence all the way to south of like Britton's Neck in southern Marion County, and where it comes together with the Little PD. Then you got the Waccamaw River. It's basically under all-time record flooding from just north of Conway all the way to Winyah Bay and Georgetown. And then you got some of the intercoastal waterway near Socastee, and that's where some of my friends are. And they've taken it right on the worst of it. I mean, they got 7 feet of water at their house right now, and it's really sad to see their house on stilts. It hasn't been affected, and hopefully it doesn't happen. But there's so many people out there that that has happened, and that's just unfortunate.
Chris, I think all this talk we've been having about flooding and everything is very timely. We also saw some material this week that I wanted to share with everyone about the runoff, because like you mentioned, the storm is almost a week gone now, but we still have all this water that we're trying to get rid of out of our system, and we're seeing that now running off into the ocean as it makes its way down all those tributaries. And there's been a lot of talk about what it's picking up along the way, and we had some images released, satellite imagery released this week, that shows that dark blue there you see on the top, or on the bottom it's actually colored so you can see it even a little bit better as a kind of an orangish brown color. That's all of that water, that flooding water that's coming down those rivers and streams, and along the way it's picking up a combination of both natural and kind of human created pollution. So you might have things that are natural, like soils, different soils from different regions, different plant material that it's picking up, but then also we've heard about the possible ash coal spill at the Duke Power Plant, or anything it just might be encountering as it's flooding over those banks. So this was, I think, some very startling images that people were seeing this week, and kind of setting the record straight that it's a combination of both natural and unnatural runoff, but you can see it there along the coastline as this now begins to work its way out of some of those affected regions. Chris, I was also working to bring up, and I don't have it ready just yet, so everyone bear with me just a moment, but Chris, you were talking about your friends who still have situations with flooding, and you mentioned Conway. We still have some roads there that are very hard to pass. They're doing their best to keep those roadways open to battle those still rising waters. We have also been streaming, as you've seen on our YouTube, Facebook Live, or Periscope pages, this USGS camera. This is the PD River. This was, it says live, but this is yesterday. We were happy to find this camera. We were talking a lot during the last hour about monitoring tides, and one of the ways that Christine mentioned they do that is in partnership with the USGS and their monitoring systems. This one happens to have a camera on it. You can see that bridge there, and you can look at the support of those bridge, and you can see just how high that water is. Again, this is not video from a week ago. This is video from yesterday. And so that's why, folks, if you're not living along the coast, if you're unsure what the situation there is still, you can see that we still have some very, very high water levels. Chris, Scotty?
Yeah, I definitely want to just add on to what you said. Especially with the contaminant stuff that goes into the ocean. Something a lot of folks don't realize. When you get in floodwaters like this, especially around urban areas, or you don't even have to be in urban areas. Big farming areas, stuff like that. When you have this much rainfall and you got such widespread, catastrophic flood, and the water is not safe to be in. And you might say, well, it's not moving that fast. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the biological and chemical contaminants that's in that water. You flood a neighborhood, you flood a town, a city, everything that's in the ground's coming out. Everything that's in the sewers is coming out. I can tell you from personal experience of, from my days of fighting fires and doing swiftwater rescue, and what I dealt with in 2015, everything that's in the sewer line that comes out of your house, and everybody knows what I'm talking about, is in the water. And I'll just leave it at that. It's no time to be in the water. And it's just a breeding ground for bad things to happen. Not just the hazards from whether it be, a road washed out or some kind of underwater hazard you can't see, just the chemical and biological hazards. And that scares me more than anything. So I really just want to urge folks, if you ain't got no business being in the water, don't be in the water. And if you're going to be in the water, just make sure you got some kind of protection between your skin. You don't want that water touching your skin. And just to hit on a couple more things. Let's see here. Where can I go?
Hey, Chris, while you're talking about that, our panelist, Shay Gibson, he tweeted out earlier today a very well-known man from Wilmington, North Carolina, Ron Phelps, actually passed away this morning due to complications from an infection from the floodwaters that was in the area. So that just kind of shows you just how nasty and toxic this water is.
I mean, just not to be an alarmist, but to be a realist. In a lot of this floodwater, especially in these populated areas and neighborhoods, there's a decent chance, that floodwater is carrying communicable diseases like hepatitis. It's very, very, very good possibility. I mean, there's all kinds of waterborne illness that just is breeding in water. And it's not somewhere you want to be. It's not something to go, play in and have joy time. I see a lot of kids doing that, need to eat water or something like that, just have playing in the water. Flood water's not so much. No, it's probably not the best idea.
Not at all. You have a few more things to pull up, Chris? Or
yeah. I was pushing out a couple things across my personal Twitter page, and you guys can retweet it from our weather group thing. But a bunch of phone numbers: SCEMD and SCDOT, Horry County EMD. They've all done a great job in just keeping people up to date on the latest. They've all got hotlines, 24-hour hotlines set up for folks that may have questions, whatever that question might be. There's people there to answer that question. And really urge people, if you do have a question, seek the official source of information, and do what you can do to find out the best information. I also know that FEMA is accepting I think like disaster applications from 5 counties in South Carolina. I think it's going to be Marion, Horry, Florence, maybe Dillon and Chesterfield.
Yeah,
or
Chesterfield.
Yeah. It's like all the counties basically from North Carolina and the PD down to the Grand Strand. But this is an ongoing thing. And before I turn it back over to you guys, I'm just going to pull up the hydrograph right in Conway because it's absolutely incredible. I mean, here we are. You guys got it on the screen. Like I said, September 14th, 12 days ago. It's September 26th now, and we're just now seeing it crest the Waccamaw River in Conway. And if you look, going out in time, right here where my mouse cursor's at, by Sunday into Monday of next week, we're still above the previous all-time record high. We're not like, down in the major states. We're still above the previous record high. This is going to take time. This is going to take 2 weeks, for it all go away. And let's just hope we don't get any more rain on top of that. That's what I, really try to tell people from the get-go. I'm not so much worried about the winds. I am the rain and the long-lasting impacts the rain's going to cause.
And Chris, that's a good point that you're talking about, because what the difference may be for here in Western North Carolina, we have a lot of elevation and changes and stuff. So that kind of helps funnel the water and kind of pushes it out. But when you get down there, in the coastal areas, all this land is flat. There's nowhere for this water to go. It's backed up. There's only a few outlets for it to get out into the ocean. So these are going to be long-term effects.
I mean, you think about it. I don't know the spatial size because I haven't, I guess, dove that deep into it. But that's probably actually something I'm going to do when we get done on our show tonight. It's just look and see what kind of size, square mileage wise. But you think about it, all of eastern South Carolina and a big portion of southeastern North Carolina, basically from Lumberton, the entire Waccamaw River watershed, Lumber River, PD, both PD rivers, all that water's got to go through basically Winyah Bay, and it's going to go right through Georgetown. And that's next on the list. A lot of the things I've been seeing out of Georgetown, there's a lot of folks down there really, I guess, apprehensive because they're not really sure exactly how bad that's going to be because, they don't know if they've ever seen anything like this ever. So, I know that, they've had some local evacuations going on down there and, been preparing for the worst, which is, the best thing you can do in a situation like this. But, hopefully everything works out for the best. And if there's anything I can do for anyone out there, by all means, you know where to find me.
Definitely so, Chris. And Wilmington also facing something similar. as all of the Cape Fear River is kind of flowing now into Wilmington. So expecting to see some water rise there. One thing I wanted to show you guys, Stephen Paff, he's the warning coordinator meteorologist at the Wilmington office. He was out earlier today, and he was doing these hot water surveys. And so this was the aftermath after the waters receded. This is in Kelly, North Carolina. I think this is in Pender County, I believe is where they were today. And just look at the road here. You can see
What was a road.
Yeah. And you can see the effects of this floodwater. And unfortunately, this is a scene that we've seen a lot in eastern North Carolina and northeast South Carolina. So even when these floodwaters, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you pull that video up real quick? I just want to point something out. You something really interesting. I guess it was right near the end of that video when it was panning back around to the right. I'll tell you when to stop it. Right in there somewhere. You can see that when the camera pans back around to the right, you see the roadway, and it looks like there's waves. That's because the water actually got up underneath the asphalt surface right there.
Right in here. Yeah.
And you always see people driving through the floodwaters because they see asphalt. Just because you see asphalt doesn't mean there's a road under it. I promise you. What happens is the water gets under the road and it erodes the road from underneath. You could be driving along, you think you're perfectly fine. Next thing you know, you're in 8 feet deep moving water, and it could be the mistake that costs you life. And that's, it's just not worth it. That's why I hate seeing people drive through floodwaters so bad.
Yeah, it's definitely not worth it. If the barricades are up, you don't want to go around those. And so our thoughts are with those folks who were in Horry County and Georgetown County as this water continues to flow towards those areas. And thankfully, we didn't get much rain off of the tropical system off the North Carolina coast. And so that was a much needed break that they received there. I've got the Hurricane Center's page up, so we'll screen share this. We'll talk just a couple seconds about this, and then we'll come to end the program here. But this is the National Hurricane Center. As you can see, we still have Tropical Storm Kirk out in the ocean. It's kind of redeveloped. It's supposed to go through the islands here and then kind of dissipate once it gets in the Caribbean Sea. And then we have another little disturbance area up here in the northern Atlantic, about a 70% chance of formation. So that will probably gain tropical depression or tropical storm status within the next couple of days, but that is not expected to affect land. So those are some good news there, but just know that we are still in tropical season, and James, you and Chris know October is always, or at least in the past 4 or 5 years, has been busy here in the Carolinas with the tropics, with Joaquin and Matthew and Nate. So we'll have to see what happens this year. And the Gulf of Mexico is still a hotbed. I mean, that water's hardly been touched. 80, 85 degree water temperatures down there. It's just asking for a storm to get up in that area.
Yeah, I want to remind people as we exit September and come into October, the hurricane season is still active. September is the average point that we see all this activity. Just because it's not August anymore and summer vacation is over, these waters are still very, very warm, as Scotty alluded to. And although this will be minor in the grand scheme of things compared to how much rain Florence brought us, the system that's coming through tonight, followed by the persistent on and off rain we'll see for the next day or two, is just going to be adding insult to injury. However little rain we see, could be an inch or two in some places, so it's not nothing, but that is just kind of again going to be an added irritation for folks who are already dealing with flooded water. And here right now, we'll look at the live radar as this cold front moves into the Carolinas, and with it brings those thunderstorms depending on where you are watching us from tonight.
That's right, James. I've got the Weather Prediction Center's excessive rainfall graphic up, and as you can see, there's a slight chance of flash flooding tomorrow for the mountains and foothills of western North Carolina, and then a marginal threat of flash flooding for the upstate of South Carolina towards the Charlotte metro area, back towards Winston-Salem, Greensboro, and then up into Virginia. So there is a chance tomorrow with the rain that we're going to see that we could see some flash flooding in some areas. So That is a possibility, and I was going to show you the next 3 days. We could see anywhere between another 1 to 2 inches, maybe even 3 inches of rain in portions of the Carolinas. So really no rain is really needed anywhere in North or South Carolina, but it does look like over the next day or so that we could see some rain. And it may not prompt flash flooding in eastern North Carolina and northeast South Carolina. It's definitely going to kind of add insult to injury with more rainfall. So hopefully everything will be okay.
I was going to add on to that, Scotty. I was looking in AWIPS because I'm on this AWIPS kick right now. It's new weather console, but I was looking at all the flash flood guidance from NCEP earlier, and most of all the river basins east of Columbia, south of Raleigh, that entire area that's been affected by Florence, their flash flood guidance is for 3 hours about 3 inches. And we all know in South Carolina we can get 3 inches of rain in 1 hour out of a good thunderstorm. So something to watch, something to be mindful of. If you live around these areas that's seeing flooding, that's still continuing to see flooding, especially tomorrow afternoon through Friday. Just be mindful of the weather.
That is right. So with that, we will start to wind down the show. Next week, we have Damon Lane on with us, chief meteorologist out at KOCO in Oklahoma City. I bet you didn't know Damon actually went to school here in North Carolina. So we're going to talk to Damon for next week's show. We're going to have an hour show with him. And then the following week, we're going to have Chris White on with us. He's going to be talking to us about the Mid-Atlantic Storm Chasers Conference. It's going to be going on in Richmond, Virginia, towards the end of October. So Chris will join us with that. And then on the 17th of October, we'll be talking with the folks at the Farmer's Almanac. We hear the Farmer's Almanac a lot in forecasting, and so we're going to kind of talk with them and dive in directly how they get their information and how they produce their forecasts. So that's what it looks like for the next few weeks here at the Carolina Weather Group. As always, if you have any recommendations of guests or topics, please feel free to reach out to us. We would love to to get those folks on the show and get them signed up for a date. I will let you know we are booking now for January of 2019. It looks like everything is done for the rest of this year. So kudos to the team on getting folks booked. But we'll be taking new bookings in January. So you have plenty of time to get us some guests or some topics you'd like for us to talk about, and we would love to reach out to them. So for everyone here at the Carolina Weather Group, for James Brierton and Chris Jackson, we wanted to thank you, and Miss Christine Voss. Go check out the North Carolina King Tide Project. Go help them out if you live along the coast or any waterways, and you can help monitor the water levels. I know they would appreciate that help. And as always, thanks for watching the Carolina Weather Group. You see a great image of Hilton Head, South Carolina as we log off. We hope you have a great weekend. We'll see you back here next Wednesday night.